Okay, thank you everyone for joining our webinar on transition goals, activities, and services in the IEP webinar on March 28th, 2023. Presenter Diane Perry, Family Resource Specialist at the PEAL Center. Disclaimer, the ARC of Lehigh, Northampton County's Advocacy Department does not employ lawyers nor provide legal advice. This training or any other provided by the ARC Advocacy Department does not constitute or imply the endorsement, recommendations, or favoring of the providing parties or any employees or contractors acting on its behalf. This webinar is being provided for educational and informative purposes only. Now I'd like to introduce our guest presenter, Diane Perry, who has over 20 years of education, advocacy, and family leadership experience. She is a family resource specialist for the PEAL Center in Philadelphia. In addition to her work at the PEAL Center, she serves as a vice chair of the State Special Education Advisory Panel. She has a son, David, who she highly speaks about in most of her presentations, and I'm sure she will tonight as well. And I hope you have a great presentation tonight, and the Zoom is yours.
Thank you for having me again tonight. And I see some familiar names in the listing there. So hello to all my good friends that I know and all my new friends I hope to get to know. So I'm Diane Perry, and yeah, I am going to be talking about transition goals, services, and activities in the IEP. And Kodi just talked about how I talk about my son, David, and as she was reading the thing and saying, you know, I have over 20 years of experience, I just had this revelation like, oh my God, I'm going to have to change that number soon because he just turned 30 and he's my, you know, why I do all the work that I do, gave me my career because he was born with a disability, a lifelong disability, and he just turned 30. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, at some point I can say over 30 years. Oh my boy, that scared me. But anyway, and he just came home. He goes to Widener University. He's graduating this year, and he bought his cap and gown. So he was happy to show me the bag that he's got his cap and gown. So anyway, good to share good news with everybody. All righty. So tonight, and we're going to, and all I say all that because we're talking about transition goals, services, and activities in the IEP. David wouldn't have been able to do the things that he's doing now and going to college and all that if we didn't plan, right? We have to plan. And that's what this presentation is going to be about, is planning those goals, services, and activities in the IEP. So the PEAL Center. So I work for the PEAL Center, and the mission of the PEAL Center is to educate and empower families to ensure that children, youth, and young adults with disabilities and special healthcare needs lead rich, active lives as full members of their schools and communities. We are what's called a PTI, a Parent Training and Information Center in the state of Pennsylvania. We serve families across Pennsylvania. I work out of the Philadelphia office. We have a Pittsburgh office, and then we have a spattering of my colleagues all around the state working remotely as well. And so that is how we're able to serve statewide. We do a whole host of information and resources. So I really encourage all of you who are not familiar with the PEAL Center's website to please check it out. Tonight, I'm doing, you know, just one of the presentations that we do. We have several others. If you're involved in a group, you can always, you know, request a training. We do resource fairs, and I do as a family resource specialist, I provide one-on-one assistance, individual assistance to families, helping them navigate the special education system, understanding their rights, the processes, forms, anything that has to do with special education. So tonight we get to talk about one of my favorite topics. If you were with me, what was that? Was that last week or the week before? I think 2 weeks ago, right? It was, yeah, on the 14th. So I was with you on the 14th, and I kind of gave an overview of transition, right? Now we're going to dig in a little bit more deeper on specifically, and I'm going to do an overview too and take us through, but really dig into a more detailed session tonight around the actual grid, the services and activities and the goals, all that has to do with transition and what you need to do, and how you can be prepared for that for your next meeting. So I'll be going over those 3 sections again, and the grid, like I said, and just really diving into all those details for everyone. So I just want to go over and let you know that in the law, in the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, as it so fondly is referred to as, I want to read this to you because this is actually in the law, right? To ensure that all children with disabilities have available to them a free, appropriate public education that emphasizes special education and related services designed to meet their unique needs and prepare them for further education, employment, and independent living. That is in the law. That is why those 3 sections on your IEP are on there, because it's in the law. It's about that furthering the education. It's about employment, getting a job when you exit the school system, and being prepared for that independent living. And I'm going to dive into a little bit more about what independent living really means. It does not mean, oh, we're living on our own and we're good to go, you know, because a lot of people, myself, we're interdependent, right? We do rely on different people. I have a whole host of people who help me out. So, you know, and that's okay, right? That's what we all need. So independent living doesn't necessarily mean that. So I'm going to break that down a little bit further too, as I go through the presentation. So let me start off by talking about secondary transition, and that's exactly what we're doing here. So transition should be conceptualized as a bridge between school programs and the opportunities of adult life, including higher education, employment, independent living, and community participation. Transition planning involves a partnership between the student, the family, school-age services and program providers, post-school services, and local community members or community organizations. Effective transition involves purposeful planning among all these entities. It also entails recognizing the student's current strengths, interests, preferences, and needs, and then identifying what services and supports that student will need to achieve the future success. So kind of going to break it down into 4 major components, and then I'm going to get into some of the details about all these 4 components. But the first component is the student, along with the parent or guardian, should be knowledgeable about their goals for life after high school and to develop a long-range plan to achieve those goals. The second component is to design the educational experience that begins at age 14 with determining what are those courses of study to ensure that the student gains the skills and competencies needed to achieve their desired post-school goals. The third component is to identify and link the students and the parent and guardian with those needed post-school services, supports, or programs before the student graduates or exits that school system. So really being connected to those systems before you leave the school system. And then that 4th major component is students will graduate with knowledge, skills, and competencies to set and achieve their academic career, personal goals toward lifelong learning. It will also identify their strengths and skills and achievements, identify self-determination strategies, identify successful other strategies that work for that student, and also identifying those services and agencies needed to support those goals during transition. So I always have to, when I talk about transition, I always got to talk about the vision. You always have to think big. I was just recent, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the various tools that we can, I'll get to that in a minute. I'll tell that story in a minute though. But anyway, you're going to start with a vision, right? You have to think big, no matter how old your child is, whether they're in elementary school, middle school, high school, you know, it's never too late. What does that student's, excuse me, what does that student's life look like in a perfect world? Think big. What does that really look like? And then we're going to scale it down. It's all going to be about scaling it down. What's that look like in 2 to 5 years? What's that going to look like in 5 to 10 years? You know, you have to start with that vision, write a vision statement. What does your child enjoy doing? Where do they enjoy doing that? Or who do they like to be with when they're doing these kinds of things? Imagine it, talk about it, write it down, and share it with others. As family members, I know for David, you know, when he was younger, I always wrote that vision statement, you know, what we thought would be good for David. And then as he got older, as he got into the later middle school years, and definitely at the high school, he took ownership of that vision. He started talking about it. So that's what's the important piece. You want the child, the student, to take ownership so that it's coming from them and not just mom. And that's really important, because sometimes the school people think, oh, that's just what what I want or whatever. No, these are things that David talks about. These were things that we knew as a family he wanted. So this is just a picture of the process that we're going to be reviewing tonight. And it's called Indicator 13. So the Department of Education has to do reporting on various indicators to the federal government, right? Because IDEA is a federally funded law. And so the states, all states have to say, okay, where are they in different indicators? And so secondary transition is what's called Indicator 13. So this is kind of just a graphic to kind of talk about what that looks like, you know, in the beginning there on the school bus. As you're driving all along, you know, you're going through different assessments and interests, and all that's going to, you know, become post-secondary goals. Look at those skills, and then, you know, you're going to bring it down, and you're going to, you know, look at that present level section of the IEP and what's those courses of study, you know, all this language that you see on that IEP. I'm going to break it all down tonight, but this is just a full picture of what happens. And in the end, there's that, you get a summary of academic achievement and functional performance. So when your student actually exits the school district, they're getting their diploma, they're done, you actually are to get a summary of all the academic achievement and functional performance about your student. So when does this planning all begin? Well, in Pennsylvania's Chapter 14 regulations, it can start at age 14, okay? Federally, like if you go to another state, they may not start at 14 because by federal regulations, it's 16. But every state can have their own regulations, which we do, which are called Chapter 14 regulations, where they can emphasize the law in more ways, or, make it better, so to speak. So we have regulations in Pennsylvania that other states might not have. So if you're into reading regulations, please feel free to look up Chapter 14 Pennsylvania, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But in there, we do have that in Pennsylvania. We start at age 14 because federally, years ago, I'm not sure what year it changed, but it used to be 14. The feds changed it to 16, but the Pennsylvania said, well, we're going to keep it at 14. We think that's important. So that was really good. So there are lots of transition planning tools, and this is really important because a good transition starts with good planning. Kind of like I say, when evaluations are happening, a good evaluation is going to give you a good IEP. Same with transition. if you have a good transition plan and starts with the good planning. And there are all kinds of wonderful tools available for various assessments and getting students' interests and skills. And here's where I'll put my little my story in. I had the pleasure and honor of doing what's called a PATH. That on the first line there's person-centered planning tools, life course, PATH. So we always did a PATH for David, and it's called the Planning for Alternatives to Tomorrow's Hopes and Dreams, or hopes and successes, actually. And so we used to do them for David all the time. That's why, you know, that's why I love transition, because I just love talking about it. I love all that planning piece, because it really was a great guide for us to help him to build also that social capital, you know, that those opportunities of people that will be around David and for David when you know, me and his father are not around, right? So because we may not be here, so he needs to build that circle. But you know, we would do all these planning tools. We started actually in middle school. But I had the pleasure, I was asked to do a PATH for a young lady I've known her and her mom for several years, and I got to do her PATH on Sunday, and it was just so exciting. She had a great group around her. She had school people. She had she was part of the Girl Scouts, and the leaders were there, and she had another person who was helping with her leadership skills with the PYIM, Pennsylvania Youth Leadership Network. She had neighbors, she had family. It was just a great day. So, you know, things like that good planning, you know, I know she's going to go far, and I know her parents are going to feel good that they're building that social network for her. And actually, she's doing it on her own. She actually co-facilitated it with me. She was up the front of the room for those couple hours the whole time. It was awesome. So that's why you know, we talk about these person-centered tools. You know, there's a life course PATH. You can do that through the PA Family Network. They help you with the life course, and then there's a MATS planning. So all of these various different tools will help the student go, you know, that's the whole planning pieces, right? So I always like to say that all planning starts with that person-centered thinking. You're thinking about that student. They are the center of person-centered thinking. And again, what you're looking at is, you know, when I talked about that vision, it's like, what's that dream? What's that dream? And I just love talking about that. If you had no barriers whatsoever, what's those goals and dreams, and what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? Who do you want around you? Where do you want to live? You know, all those wonderful things that you want in life. And then, you know, so you start with those tools, but then that does lead you to, well, what's that going to look like for a job? What kind of assessments do I need around that? You know, and then eventually utilizing those visions and these person-centered tools helps develop sometimes that IEP, right? Or that individual support plan. If you're connected with, if you have autism or an intellectual disability and you qualify for various funds through the county, you might have an ISP, an individual support plan. And then when you, for employment, if you're connected with the Office of Vocational Rehab, OVR, you'll get an individual plan for employment. But all of that comes from all these planning tools, right? What's that vision? What are we doing? So let me show you how all of this kind of connects here. This is what this slide is really showing. So just trying to move this thing, but it's not moving on me. All right. So maybe if I do that, there we go. Oh, thank you, Susan. I saw congratulations, David, in the chat. So alignment with the IEP, the present ed level. So this is kind of how it goes in six, how you come up with things on that IEP, where that conversation comes from. So let's start at the top there. The present levels of academic achievement and functional performance is your baseline information that gives you that starting point. That is in the beginning of the IEP, right? Right in the beginning, present level section. This is that baseline. This is where all of that information comes from. Comes from the evaluation. It comes from teacher comments and parent, you know, all of that. So that's where it starts. That's your starting point. Then you get into the needs, the areas of need that must be addressed in the IEP, right? Those needs are identified through evaluations, assessments, various tools like that. Then you get into that grid on the train, and I'm going to show you'll see different slides with that grid. But on that grid, there's services or activities listed that will help the student achieve their post-secondary goals. And I'm going to go in detail on that. Then you have your MAGs, your measurable annual goals. Now, these are those specific areas of the skill deficits that will be targeted for instruction and monitoring. Not all of your measurable annual goals will be connected to a transition goal or a transition activity, whatever, but some of that might be. And I'm going to show you examples of that as well. And then you have that progress monitoring. How and how often will we monitor the skill to ensure that that student is actually on track to achieve all these goals? That progress monitoring is really important. Okay. Now, here is a math example. So in those present level section, you're going to see some of this baseline data. You're going to see that the student is now scoring basic on a 4-site math. They have errors in algebraic equations. This student currently scores 13 correct on algebra foundation probes. Okay. So the need out of that information is they need to improve skills with algebraic concepts, including solving equations and inequalities. Now, on that grid, you might see something like improve skills in solving algebraic equations, and because that is the need, right? So you're probably going to see that on the grid because that might be helping them reach a certain goal. Now, they do have a measurable annual goal on the IEP around this math, which is given a biweekly algebra foundations curriculum assessment. Chloe will solve equations and inequalities. So, with the probes and all that. I don't need to read all that, but basically you get the idea. They are working on a measurable annual goal that's going to be progress monitored, right? Which is that last section. The learning support teacher and Chloe are going to chart number of correct answers on each algebra assessment and analyze that. Now, who knows what Chloe's goal is on her transition section, but it may entail something around math that she's going to need to improve those skills. And that's why it would be on the grid, because you're going to connect that later on. And I'm going to show you that on later slides as well. So I do want to reiterate, because we're going to be going through these various sections tonight, the 3 areas of focus: post-secondary education and training, employment, and independent living. Now, this is what it looks like on the IEP. Hopefully this looks familiar to some of you. If you're in the transition phase, hopefully you better have seen this. And maybe even if you're not in the transition age right now, you're probably seeing that on the IEP. And most of the times they say, oh, they're not 14 yet, we don't need to fill this section out. But this is where it all begins, right? This is going to be that first one is the post-secondary education and training goals. All right. So I'm going to be giving examples throughout all of these sections for you tonight too. And again, you are getting this PowerPoint and the handouts for it too. So here's just an example of example goals that could be written as that post-secondary section, right? That post-secondary goal. And there's a few of them listed here. I'm not going to read all of them, but Brian plans to attend a 2-year technical program. So that's appropriate to put as a post-secondary goal, right? Chris plans to attend a nursing school. So that's furthering Chris's education. And Ron plans to have on-the-job training in a trade. So that might include a trade school, right? So, or the IEP team has documented that a goal and related services and activity for this area are not needed at this time. Now, that is usually because you're not 14 yet. Other than that, there should be something for a goal, no matter what gifts and talents that student brings. If they have complex needs, they have some type of, training that they might want to do. There might be a college, a community college. There's lots of colleges for that have inclusive higher ed programs for people with intellectual disabilities, autism, all kinds of various supports. My son, David, that's where he's graduating from. He's Widener University. It was an inclusive higher ed program, and that is where he's graduating from. He audited the courses and the college classes that he took, and he's moving on with his life. So he's trying to find out where he wants to go, right? I mean, I think for him, he probably would want to be a lifelong student, because he's already talking about, doing community college type classes too, but we'll see how it goes. Let's one step at a time. He keeps us hopping, that's for sure. Now, the next section is that employment. So the next page is going to be on your IEP, the employment grid. So let me give you some examples about what might be written for that employment goal, right? So Jesse has a goal of working in the travel industry, okay? Lee plans to enlist in the Army after high school, and Mark's goal is to work with computers after graduation. And again, or the IEP team has documented that given, the intense medical and cognitive challenges, a goal and related services for employment are not appropriate for this particular student at this time. Now, I'm here to tell you that almost every student will have an employment goal. And for me, I don't even want to say almost. I say every student will have an employment goal, no matter what they bring to the table. Anybody can work. We got to figure it out. You got to be creative. Is it hard? Absolutely. But it can happen. And I just have seen so many success stories with various students and various older people, as they get older and go through life, and what they've been able to accomplish. So I'm a real positive person and believe that every student should have an employment goal. And students who say they want to go to college are actually preparing for employment, right? They want to do something, probably have a career. Maybe they don't know what the career is yet. Students might even say, I don't want to work. I just want to collect benefits, but they still have to be prepared for employment, even if they don't want to, even if they're voicing that and saying, I don't know if I can do, and it might be, negative, that whole negative thinking. That's okay, but they still need to be prepared. The school still needs to prepare all students for some type of employment. Now, the third section is that independent living part of the grid. Now, let's try and start breaking some of that down, right? So things you need to be considering and thinking about when you're thinking about independent living and writing something in that goal. Think about communication. Consider all the effective ways to communicate. A student would have to communicate with everyone. Everybody communicates differently, whether that's, with their voice, whether that's with their hands, whether that's with a device, body motion, that everybody communicates differently. And then, so you might need to consider some type of a different evaluation and work together with maybe it's some type of specialist. So you have to consider communication. You must consider assistive technology if they're using that communication device. The team needs to identify which resources should be used to meet those communication needs. Community and civic participation. Is the student registered to vote? Where can they learn about issues about various candidates? And what rights do they have as a person with a disability to go vote? Do they know what their rights are? If they get there and maybe it's not accessible, or maybe, they need help, or, do they know what they, how they can ask for help? Are they involved in the community somehow? Do they participate in any kind of neighborhood or, associations that might be in your neighborhood, no matter where you live? And across Pennsylvania, we're varied. There's all kinds of various groups and clubs and different things that are in your community. Who do they know? How can they get involved? Financial literacy. Oh my gosh, that's so important. I will say that I sometimes pull my hair out, or I go like this. I'm like, oh my gosh, when I see something that, they don't need any help in this area. And my first question is, well, do they know how to budget? Do they know how to like get an apartment? Do they know like how to, get around if they're living on campus, if they go to live on their own in a dorm? Like, you got to think about these things. Financial literacy is so important, that education around that. Relationships, what are those meaningful activities? Do they have some social recreation opportunities? Think about these things and write them down. Do they need any kind of assistance with, various having correct relationships and knowing and understanding and being protective of yourself? Because students with disabilities, and as our students become young people, are very vulnerable. Very vulnerable. So they need to know how to protect themselves. And then recreation and fitness. You think about that for independent living, like transportation in the community. How do they navigate around their neighborhood? What about companion services? How do you stay safe? That's another area. And all the various activities that happen in your community, like going to the movies or being involved in some kind of sports or dance and clubs and activities. There's all kinds of things for recreation and fitness. Joining the gym. More things that you need to consider. See, so, that independent living section really can be beefed up a lot when you really think about it. So these considerations don't mean that you cannot live independently. It just means that goals need to be set to address these issues. So it's not a matter of, oh, you have to do this to live independently. No, you're just, doing some goals. You're getting some of this to address some of those issues. So really think about what are those indicators that a student may need for that independent living area. And there's a few other things listed here as well. So when you're thinking about independent living and that goal, think about the data-based decision-making, right? And what's that essential question? So when you think about it, given the data we have on this particular student, do we anticipate that the student will need supports to prepare to meet their goal for living in and accessing the community, whether they do it independently, with family support, or maybe even with agency support? And you answer these questions. If it's yes, then you're probably going to put in some services and activities. If it's no, the data might suggest right now that they don't need it, but maybe they don't need it right now, but you need to revisit this every year on that IEP in that section and have that conversation with your IEP team. So here are some of your examples that could be for independent living. Caroline's goal is just to live independently. Zach's goal is he wants to live with his family, but he's going to need some supports to access the community. Okay. And Jill's goal is to live in a supported apartment and to access her community resources and programs with supports. Now, for students who are not anticipated to need services, you can write something like Jeff's goal is to live on his own once he has established employment. All right. So you're working on that employment. But based on the data, the IEP team has determined that a goal and services for the independent living area are not needed at this time. Again, what is Jeff's financial literacy? What does that look like? And it might be fine, but I'm just saying, I just went through a lot of things on those other slides, and look at those. And does Jeff need any help in any of those areas? All right. So now let's look at that next section, right? We just went over the goals at the top for the grid. And now the next part of the grid is the courses of study. So what exactly are courses of study? So let's talk about that. Let's talk about this section. So decisions on appropriate courses of study are team decisions, IEP team decisions, which means the parent and the student are part of that team. Courses selected should support that post-secondary goal. Inclusion in general education curriculum is, of course, a consideration for the team. If they're in those courses, you have to think about that. A career and technical education, sometimes called CTE program, is considered a course of study. And if so, there's a certain code, a CIP code that should be right on an appropriate spot. Your school team would know what that is, and they could look that up. And you also want to be sure to invite that representative from the CTE to the meeting, so that all of the needs are talked about. And you want to list the courses by name as they are on the catalog, you know, that you're, when you pick your courses at school. Now note if something like work-based learning or community-based instruction is part of an actual course, list by the exact name as is listed in the list of school courses. So some of that might be part of an actual course. You want to list the actual course name. That's what this is for. And the list of courses need to reflect that current school year, those courses that you're currently in, that they're in for that IEP term. And if the schedule or course selection changes during the duration of the IEP, then a revision needs to be made, and you need to revise that on the IEP. Okay. So that's the courses of study. That's what that is about. So here's some examples. Okay. Full of examples tonight. So auto body repair program. So at this particular school, there's an auto body repair program, and that's what it says. And the student's taking English 3, they're taking Algebra 2, Chemistry, and US History, right? So that's the courses of study that's listed. And then the second one underneath there, you know, just shows some more courses for another student. That's the courses of study. So the next area around that courses of study is the transition services and activities. So how do we assist a student reaching their dreams? One way is by structuring the services and activities, also known as action steps, directly related to their post-school goals. Now, these services and activities must occur during the duration of the whole IEP, and there must be at least one activity and service for each of the 3 areas. Again, at least one service needs to be tied to those goals. At least one activity should be there to help the student reach their goal. Okay. All right. Example time. So you have services which address the skill deficits. They lead to maybe a measurable annual goal and progress monitoring. And then you have your set of activities. And that's what I have listed here. And the activities is helping a student achieve those post-secondary goals, and they don't need measurable annual goals. So that's the difference between services and activities. Now, the important point here is that we don't write measurable annual goals for activities such as those on the right. But we must have at least one measurable annual goal under each identified post-secondary goal. And that measurable annual goal supports the student in achieving their goals by addressing those deficits. That's where those needs come in, right? Not every service will have an IEP goal that corresponds. So example may be like counseling to address mental health needs, as an example, or assistive technology services. Now, these services, the student requires, those type of services are required for FAPE, the free appropriate public education, and to address their post-secondary goals. So it's not just post-secondary, it's for other things too. But they may not have a measurable annual goal for that. And you just have to remember that those MAGs, the measurable annual goals, are prioritized. And we want to try and limit to few areas that are important enough to measure. So you don't do it for all, because you just really want to prioritize and identify those. So just to give you some quick examples on the services, some services, for examples, could be building your vocabulary skills, learning to board a bus, initiating peer interaction, or even some examples for activities would be, they're going to be visiting that college or a job fair. They're going to maybe complete their career portfolio. They're going to do some job shadowing or their senior project. So these are actual activities that you would list under that section of the IEP. Now, this is not an exhaustive list These are just some examples. And it is important to only list activities that the LEA, the school, is going to support. For example, it is recommended that you do not list tour college campuses. Now, a lot of families tour college campuses, but that's not something the school's going to do. Okay, they're not going to take your child on a school tour, right? That's what we kind of do during spring break. A lot of families go visiting colleges, or maybe they do that during winter, depending, they find different times to visit those colleges. So that is not something that would be listed on there. Now, something that could be listed is that the student's going to do an internet search of various colleges. So that can be done in the school. And then they give that list to the parent and they go. So these are just some examples on here, guest speakers, learning about accommodations, contacting the disability services office, because they may need that when they go to college. So just some different things, time management. Now here I'm going to be going through some more examples, all right? And this is the whole grid, right? This is your whole transition grid right here. And it's all about Philip and his transition grid around post-secondary education. So Philip has a goal of enrolling in post-secondary training in the area of automobile repair or a related field, okay? Now, you'll see on the right-hand corner there that it says measurable, and well, at least my right, yeah, maybe it's your right, measurable annual goal up there in the corner. And you see how the word yes is in red, because you want to go down under that where that asterisk is, and it's in bold, continue to improve writing and editing skills. That denotes that it's a measurable annual goal. So earlier up in the IEP, that was an identified need under the present level section, and they identified a goal, right? There's going to be a measurable annual goal. It's going to be progress monitored. Well, this particular goal is going to help also Philip achieve this post-secondary area, okay? And then just some other services and activities that are listed here for Philip. He's going to continue to expand use of materials and digital format in his content area classes. And of course, right after that, it shows you where they're doing it, how often, when is and who's responsible for it, because that's important, right? He's also going to investigate local community college and trade school to explore program options. And, some of that's going to happen at the high school. Some of it's going to happen at the community college, maybe. So, this is just an example. And as you can see, those courses of study right at the beginning there, underneath the goal, auto repair program, the English, the algebra, chemistry, all of these are going to help Philip achieve that ultimate goal at the top. Again, that little red arrow is denoting that measurable annual goal. Now, employment. Here are some examples. Again, this is not an exhaustive list. These are just some examples that can be put in under the employment area. And I just want to let you know that the Pennsylvania Career Zone, PA Career Zone, is a website where you can discover possibilities, explore pathways to your career hub. So it's pacareerzone.org. You might want to check it out. So again, this is just some examples of activities like job fairs, a research paper on the career of their interest, some community service, and maybe they're exploring some job accommodations through a network. And what does that look like? So now we're going to look at that grid for Philip, right? Philip's goal is to have competitive employment in the area of auto body repair or a related field. That's what it looks like on the grid. So you might be thinking about, I wonder what some of those services or activities could be for Philip that he could have on his goal. Now, remember, I didn't just show you an exhaustive list, but there might have been some of those listed there that you could probably fill in here for Philip, right? So go back when you get the PowerPoint and kind of look at that. I wonder what services and activities would be good for him. How am I doing with time? Okay. you know? So for that particular job, for Philip, if I go back, he might want to do some job shadowing, right? That could be something. He might need to do a job, go to a job fair to find out what kinds of different jobs are in automotive business. He might want to do some community service to get to know the different, you know, auto repair shops in the area. So again, these are just examples that maybe might fit in here for Philip. Now, here is an example of the independent living goal. Now, this is what the grid would look like for an independent living. Now, note, if a goal area is not selected, leave the rest of the grid blank. So if there's no goal, you're just going to leave the rest of it blank. Okay. But the present levels must document why. The IEP team, including Philip and his parents, has determined that a goal and services for this area are not needed at this time. Now, apparently the whole IEP team did decide that. I'm going to go back to what I've always said, you know, let's look at those independent living examples, you know, and you know what, maybe this is fine for Philip, but I'm just saying there's always something that you might be able to learn for independent living. So, you know, if we were in person, you know, we'd be able to like mingle and kind of talk about different things and have some discussion. But so let's think about this though. So let's have, you know, I'll read this slide because I know we're recording as well. Data indicates that Philip comes to class on time, has good attendance, completes assignments in a timely manner, and is working on a driver permit. That's another thing. Volunteers in the community. He earned a Red Cross babysitting certificate, navigates through the community with friends, and manages clothing, hygiene, medication. He does good with that. Philip has started a desire to live independently once he's employed. Now, based on the above data, the team determined that an independent living goal is not needed for Philip. You might agree, you might not agree. You know, let me know your thoughts. You could put it in the chat. And just think about that. Again, you know, I'm just giving you just a snippet here. But there might be other things listed in the present level section that, you know, support this as well. You know, financial literacy is sometimes it is a course. Some high schools do have different financial literacy courses. I was actually just talking to a parent today, and she was telling me that her son is taking a course, and it talks about, you know, he was learning how to find an apartment, rent an apartment, get a budget, you know, to get an apartment, you know, so that's what financial literacy is, you know, it's really understanding and navigating all that. It could also be bank accounts, you know, and how are you accessing your bank? And do you understand all that? Do you understand, you know, when you keep swiping a card like David, oh my God, we're still going through this financial literacy with David, you know, he just thinks this is a magic card, and every time you swipe it, I always got money on it, you know, and so even at 30, we're still navigating all that with him. But, you know, so it could be any of that, you know, when we talk about financial literacy, you know, so yeah. Yeah, exactly. Good questions. Does Philip really know what it takes to live on his own, you know, and cooking, cleaning, you know, all those various skills sometimes have to come to play and you think about it. So just some more examples of activities for independent living. Again, this is not an exhaustive list as well either. But schools need to address independent living goals if there are needs. However, some students may also engage in independent living activities outside of the school setting with paid or natural supports. If a student is engaging in these activities to address their needs related to their independent living goal, then these activities should also be noted in the IEP under the present levels. So that's where that parent input, student input comes in. And you include that on the IEP because that's what they're doing. You know, it's okay they're out in the community, doing various volunteer jobs. That's good, because if it's on the IEP, then okay, then the school might need to look in a different area to assist that student, right? They don't want to duplicate the same thing if it's already being worked on. Okay. Here's a story I sometimes share as well. David wanted to, that one of his goals and dreams was to drive. He wanted to get his driver's license. Now I'm a very positive person. I am not one to crush anybody's dreams or hopes or any of that. So I said to the team, David wants to drive, then we need to let him figure that out, right? So what did we do? We started, he started studying that driver's ed manual. And back when he was in school, you actually had a physical manual. Apparently you can there's an app now, or you do it online. And, I don't even know if they still make the books. Hopefully they do, because some people still need that paper. But, he started studying that. And then he was taking some of those questions online, and he was passing them. So I was getting a little nervous because he was passing these questions to go get his driver's license. Now, he's great, and he was always great, a very good navigator. I mean, he knew exactly where we were, if I was going the wrong way, he's like, why are you going that way, Mom? Like, where are we going? Like, he knows he was navigating the community. But I, again, wasn't going to crush that dream on him. So I had him, he was going through all of that. It was time for him, I said, well, maybe it's time to go get your go do the test at the place and get your permit. I think I might have asked him a few, maybe once or twice. He wasn't ready. And then eventually he just lost interest. But you know what? He lost the interest. It wasn't any of us. It wasn't the school saying, oh no, he can't learn how to drive. It wasn't me or anybody else in the family saying, oh no, he can't. Were we nervous if he were to? Yeah. But he needed to experience that to see whether or not he could do it or not. So we gave him the tools, and eventually he just lost interest. So now this is just kind of, going over everything that I went through tonight. And I just want to bring it all back to a discussion about how you need to map things out, right? You need to have that plan, have a good plan. And it all starts in that general education courses, or the accessing that general education curriculum, and in your special ed, so you're looking at all that in the beginning, and then it kind of guides you through the process of various services and then other school activities, and just kind of looking at how you map out these activities. Yes, it's a lot. I forgot to say that in the beginning. Transition is a lot of stuff to go through, but hopefully that I've kind of broken down some of this. It might make it a little bit easier to go through transition and what the goals are and services and what you need to do. So hopefully, as I've been going through this, you're hearing some various things that might be helpful next time you talk about transition at your IEP meetings. Now, must all measurable annual goals be listed in the transition grid? No. If you were listening earlier, no, there are no federal or state regulations that require that measurable annual goals to be listed in the transition grid. But like that one slide showed you, they did put one in there, right? And they did identify that, I think it was the math one, that was a measurable annual, or writing, that was a measurable annual goal that was needed that would also correlate to that post-secondary goal, okay? So, and that is best practice when you're connecting those measurable annual goals with your post-secondary, okay? And if the IEP team cannot find a direct correlation between a measurable annual goal and a post-secondary goal, then the team may want to analyze the appropriateness of some of the measurable annual goals, right? Because they are based on the needs. So if we have needs for transition and we have a measurable annual goal, can we somehow connect it to one of those areas, 3 areas of the IEP, okay? Now, if a goal has been listed in any of the 3 areas, you must have at least one activity developed. Okay. Now, when you're writing your IEP goals, I know Patton has a great resource on writing measurable annual goals. I do tell my families that I work with, I'm not a goal writer. I give ideas out, and I might give some words, to kind of help with it, but I'm certainly not a goal writer. I do leave that up to the experts. But what I do know is that a measurable annual goal, you need to really, there's that, it needs to be clearly defined about the behavior. And you need to describe the behavior in measurable, observable terms. So what will a student actually do? Will they say something? Will they print something? Will they write something? Are they going to summarize? It's not going to be something where they're going to understand or know, or behave in a certain way. That's not, that's not the appropriate word. So, and then you look at how often will they be doing it, and how frequently are you going to be measuring those IEP goals. That's really important, is that progress monitoring. So bringing it all together, putting it all together. Let's meet Devin. All right. Devin is in grade 11. He's included in general education 100% of the day, enrolled in a career technical education auto body repair program. Not sure if he wants to go right to work after graduation or enroll in a post-secondary program, but definitely has some reading and writing needs. Now, this is just an example of a fictitious person and a best practice IEP, right? It's kind of covering all those various areas that I talked about tonight. Now, Devin has a goal of enrolling in a post-secondary training in the area of auto body repair or related field. Okay. Again, just another example. I think this is very similar to the other one, just a different name. But this one, the measurable annual goal is different. It says continuing to improve writing and editing skills using self-monitoring strategy. So that is a measurable annual goal that Devin has, right? And it's connecting to this particular area or related field. Okay, now, here is another measurable annual goal around writing, just to give you some example here. This is a strategy that's explained on Devin's IEP form. I know SCOPE stands for something. I forget what all the letters stand for, but it is a strategy that's used in schools. And my suggestion is that on an IEP, if this was my child's IEP and SCOPE was there, they might explain it to me, but I would actually ask them to write it out, because I always say your IEP, every person who picks it up should be able to pick it up and know and understand what it means. What if a substitute teacher comes in? Substitute teacher might not know what SCOPE means, right? If it's written out, then maybe it would be more helpful. Or if you take this IEP and you move to Texas, and that new school in Texas doesn't know what SCOPE is, right? So just saying, that's why measurable annual goals need to be written in very clear ways that everybody can understand it. Oh, what did I do? There we go. Okay. Now here is another example of an employment goal. Devin has a goal of competitive employment in the area of auto body repair. The courses of study, right? They correlate to that employment goal. And service their activities, improving speed and discrimination of project completion in an auto body shop. And he's doing that in the CTC program, right? That's where it's going to be happening during the school day. Now, there is a measurable goal here, continuing to improve reading comprehension skills. A measurable goal is connected to this employment goal, the post-sec or employment goal at the top there. Now, the measurable annual goal here is written out. This is the goal that's connected to that employment one. Okay, just another example of what a measurable annual goal would look like. Who's doing it? How often are they doing the probes? And when are you going to get those progress reports? You're going to get them quarterly, right? Here's an example for independent living for Devin. Devin has a goal of living independently without supports. Okay. Again, the same courses of study are still listed there. Family and consumer science, right? That's going to be probably helping with some of those independent living skills. Now, a measurable annual goal is in bold there. Prepare and cook meals for the day while using health and safety precautions in the kitchen. That is something that's measurable. And another activity underneath that is be able to budget and pay all current expenses, right? So here's that measurable annual goal around the menu. Given a menu, Devin will be able to prepare 3 hot or cold meals in one day using health and safety precautions, 100%, right? Independent living. This is direct correlation to that. Now, working backwards, right? Sometimes you have to just work backwards. You start now to build for that future, right? And that future is that vision that I talked about in the beginning. And families always make that difference, right? We're bringing that voice to the table. And when families are presuming competence of their child and holding high expectations, the youth will believe that they are capable as well. Because sometimes at IEP meetings, it can be, in evaluations, oh, they can't do this, they can't. Well, what can they do? And I don't know if I ever told that story that some of you may have heard this, where David's older brother came to one of his IEP meetings at the high school, and I had a whole group. We were going through some stuff, and I just knew I needed an extra support, and I think I had about the same even of people on our side that I did at the school. And the special ed teacher started, reviewing the evaluation and going over data and needs, and she's reading off, and David's older brother says, "Can I ask a question?" And the teachers, they all knew him because he was already 2 years ahead of David. Oh yeah, sure. What did you want to ask? Well, can you tell me what can my brother do? And there was like silence, and I was, as a mom, I was like, yes, but of course I didn't show that at the meeting. But it just goes to show, like that was the first IEP meeting that was attended by him, and to recognize that only hearing the negative was just really, really powerful. So just needed to share that. All right. This is where we're working backwards, right? Transition planning. You think about that ultimate goal, whether they want to be a veterinarian or maybe a photographer, right? Then you work your way back. Well, what do you need to do as a vet? You're going to need to go 4 years of vet school. But before that, you're going to have to graduate from a 4-year college, and you're going to have to take biology and chemistry. But before that, you have to graduate from high school and take SAT testing. So it's looking at that ultimate goal and working your way backwards. What's going to, and let the students see that so that they know what the expectation is. That's what good transition planning is. It's really thinking about it and showing all the grids. And they may be up for that. You know what? Let's presume competence. They just might do it. But here are some reminders. So even with the best laid out plans, lives will change, things will move, people come and go. You're going to have to adjust your plan as needed as well. But remember, you are never alone in that process. You want to use all your available resources. You want to ask for help. Just don't forget to keep asking for help. Build that circle of support. Build that social network, that social capital for the student. It is so important for them to have the people around them, okay? And for you as a parent, because I know there was the majority tonight are parents, and even if you have that professional role, making sure that that circle of support is around the family to help them to be strong to go through all of this. Now, here's just some benefits and services that may be helpful as you're going through transition process. There's all these various resources out there that you can tap into. Your school might have some information on it. At the PEAL Center, we have the family to family health coordinator that works with me, Kelly King. She knows how to navigate all of these systems. That's, you know, it's just amazing, the knowledge base in her head. But, you know, you might need some of these as you navigate the systems as your student gets older. Then you have the Office of Vocational Rehab, you know, understanding what those services are. And they work very closely with the Department of Ed now. There's a memorandum of understanding that they're working together, right? And that's where I get that everybody should be working towards a job. OVR is a national program, and it is designed to help people find work. There's also what's called early reach, which starts at age 14, where they just start educating about, you know, what you might need to get for a job. What are some of those skills you might think you might need? The school IEP team should invite your OVR representative to participate too, as the child gets older as well. And OVR is in the financial system as some of the other adult services. So like if your student has an intellectual disability and they might qualify for, you know, some waiver services or things through the county or the state, you know, again, there's OVR works in conjunction with some of those other adult services as well. And this is one of the adult services that you might need to participate in, which is the home and community-based services. It's called waiver services. And they're provided to people in the home or the community, and you have to qualify for them. You know, and it's for people who, you know, in the past might have qualified for like an institution or nursing home, but now you don't do that. You actually get these services. You can get them out in the home and in the community. And a lot of these are for when the student exits the school system, although some, depending on the needs and complex needs of a particular student, they may get them before that. But that's all things that you work out with your county as well, your county local office. And I know that the ARC can help you navigate all that as well. And that's why they're here tonight, so they can help you navigate any of those types of connections that you might need. So I did a lot of talking, and I know we're going to, in a minute, stop the recording and go to some questions. But this is a QR code, which has our evaluation. So if you are able tonight, if you could put your phone up there or some kind of iPad and maybe take our survey, that would be lovely, and fill that out for us. We would really appreciate it, because we are federally funded and federally mandated in IDEA. So we need to let our funders know what we're doing, how we're doing, who we're serving, things like that. But you will get this PowerPoint, and on the PowerPoint, as you can see below, there's also a link to the survey as well. So I would really appreciate you filling out those evaluations for us. And just to wrap up a little bit here too, here are just some more resources that might be helpful for you. I didn't talk much about healthcare, but there, you know, you can include healthcare as well as part of that transition. There's a checklist around that. Career link, OVR information, just some links for you, and phone numbers if you need that, as well as the PEAL Center. We're here to help you and guide you through anything. Like I said earlier, please visit our website. We have a wealth of information on there. You can send us an email, you can call us, you know, and that little circular thing kind of shows you all the areas that we support at the PEAL Center and what we do. And I thank you. And I think they'll probably stop the recording so that we can take some questions.
Yes, thank you so much. This was great. I loved all of the examples that you provided. They were really thought-provoking, those ideas within the transition grid. Yes, and I just saw that the link went in there. Thanks, Kodi.
Yep, just got it.
Wonderful. Yeah. So thank you again, Diane. I'm going to go ahead and end the recording.